the Life Feast podcast, a podcast for people who are ready to find moments of joy, even on days where it feels like life just sucked the joy right out of it. Get ready to banish your stress, rediscover your creativity, and maybe even connect with your long-lost self. We've got no BS happiness hacks, creativity boosts, all kinds of easy ways to savor the tiny, beautiful moments of our crazy busy lives. So if you are ready for life to feel more like a playful adventure and less like a never-ending to-do list, take a seat at my table. It's time to feast on your life. Walking. It sounds pretty basic. We've been doing it since we were tiny. No need to reinvent the walking wheel. Except I think there is a reason. Because even before the pandemic, we were walking on autopilot. So many of us rushing from point A to point B, not even looking in front of us, staring down at our phone and possibly walking mindlessly right into traffic. I actually witnessed that quite a bit where my studio is, in a busy downtown location. Or if, let's say, we were walking out in nature or somewhere a little more wide open, we might be on our phone multitasking, checking email, texting, calling people, reading the news. This ends up eliminating a lot of the well-being benefits that are built right into our walks. And then, of course, we've had the pandemic. We've had a year or over a year of apparently sitting on our rear ends a bit too much. So 38% of us are getting less exercise than we did before the pandemic. And a lot of those common coping strategies, right, I'm just as guilty as the next guy, but involve sitting on our couch, maybe eating some chocolate, watching your Netflix. I am not knocking any of the Netflix shows. They were very helpful as well. But I know that back in the spring, when the stay-at-home orders first hit in our area, people were walking like crazy. In my neighborhood, I saw every neighbor who had never, we live at the top of a hill in the country a little bit, and every neighbor who had never been to the top of the hill, everyone was walking up there. And then over 12,000 people have actually downloaded my free How to Take a Photo Walk guide. So that's pretty promising. We had a lot of walkers out there in spring 2020. But then winter took its toll. And now we're back in spring a year later, with all those beautiful days that start to luxuriously spill into the evening hours with so much daylight here in the US. And I think that walking really is the brain and well-being reset that we all need. I know I need it. So I've always been about exercise for my sanity, not my vanity. I won't say that I don't have any vanity. I certainly do. But truly, it was never enough of a motivator to get moving. But for my brain well-being, for my sanity, for sure, I experience the benefits of exercise so much. And there's even more compelling recent research that I want to share with you today to revive your walks. You might be thinking, if it ain't broke it, why fix it? Why do we need to change how we go for walks? But I'm going to get all Steven Tyler on you and say, you might want to walk this way and try out one of these 7 different types of walks that are incredible for your well-being. And they're pretty different. And I'm guessing that many of them you've never heard of before or tried before or consciously tried before. None of them, I assure you, include a fanny pack, a Walkman, or a shopping mall. Remember those speed walkers of the 90s? Yeah, I do too. Let's talk about walking and creativity. This podcast is all about creativity and living this bigger, fuller, feastier life, as I like to say. And even just 10 minutes of walking can improve your creativity. And walking can also improve your marriage. It can, seriously, your partnerships, your business meetings. Walking can make you more creative at work. There are a whole slew of benefits that you probably have never even considered. I first came up with this idea to research all the benefits of walking. I have fully nerded out on many benefits of walking. But it's because that I actually have had this photo walk practice for at least 33 years. Back in 1989, I was in a high school white photography film class. I was 15 years old and I was shooting with 35 millimeter film in my first SLR camera. And then the process of developing a roll of film, a very long time. It was quite tedious. So the only way that I could make it worth my while was to shoot an entire roll of 36 frames at once. Basically, I would go for a walk with the objective to be to finish that roll of film in one, I was about to say one sitting, but more appropriately, one walking. I didn't cover great distances. I didn't have a car, so I was limited to either my home, my backyard, and my neighborhood, but we lived on a pretty busy street, or I was limited to where I went to school. I was not going for Forrest Gump levels of distance. And I had to get creative with familiar surroundings, finding those new angles, looking for new details, and really getting up close and personal with my walk. I'm not sure I made the connection back then, most likely not. But these were some angsty, drama-filled teenage years, and this was a really relaxing process. I went by myself. It was quiet. I remember feeling calmer on those walks than I felt in my daily life, which makes sense because walking is this fantastic stress reducer, especially if you're walking outside in nature. Walks in nature, studies have shown, also improve your memory. So if you keep losing your car keys like I do, or forgetting why you walked into a room, might be time for a nature walk. But any kind of walking improves your cardiac risk factors, improves the blood flow to your brain, improves your, cholesterol, your blood pressure, reduces risks of diabetes, obesity, all of these fantastic health benefits. It staves off dementia and depression. But before I sound too much like an AARP newsletter, I want to share with you some walking benefits that have emerged in recent years that go way beyond your blood pressure. Did you know that exercise can actually increase your joy? A simple walk makes your brain more sensitive to joy. Crazy? Yes, it does. This comes from Kelly McGonigal's book, The Joy of Movement. Kelly McGonigal is a phenomenal health psychologist out of Stanford. And as she explains, exercise, even just walking, actually rewires the reward center of your brain. You've heard of dopamine, I'm sure. It's the pleasure center that motivates us to find all the feel-good things in our lives. And exercise actually increases the dopamine that circulates within your brain, and it also increases your dopamine receptors. Research that Kelly shares in the book is pretty fascinating. One in particular that I wanted to share with you guys here is the research that really proved this expansion of dopamine receptors and increase of dopamine in the brain, because they did studies on people who were addicted to substances. In the case of brains that have been addicted and abusing substances for a long time, dopamine actually decreases as a result of the addiction. And this can, as you can imagine, this results in decreased motivation, decreased pleasure from just the ordinary things in life, and have other repercussions. Exercise, even just 1 hour, 3 times a week, actually remodeled substance abusers' brains and undid some of the neurologic havoc that had happened due to long-term. In the study, after just 8 weeks of 3 times a week exercise, the researchers actually saw that the dopamine receptors increased inside of the brain, thereby increasing the participants' capacity to find joy and find all this pleasure in life's little things. I think, personally, after a year of the pandemic, or whenever you're listening to this, but we might all need this dopamine receptor increase. I know I do. And walking is one of the ways that you can do that. Even if we're not going through a pandemic or you're not having issues with substances, Our brains change as we age, and adults actually lose up to 13% of our dopamine receptors with each decade. So this leads to less enjoyment of those everyday pleasures anyway, just by getting older. And what they found in the research is that active older adults who are fairly active have healthier reward systems in their brains that more closely resemble people who are decades younger than they are. So they rewire the aging process as well. So not only does dopamine increase your ability to experience all of these ordinary pleasures that can bring you joy, I like to call them the small joys in life, but also this dopamine increase can increase your feelings of optimism, and collectively, this primes us to better connect with other people and strengthen our relationships. So this is where walking can improve your marriage or any sort of partnership that you're in. Partners who walk together report more closeness later in the day, feeling more loved and supported. And it's such a simple thing. No fighting over who has more cabin fever. Just go for a walk with your spouse or your bestie or your partner. And it will not only increase your dopamine receptors and your optimism and your ability to experience all these everyday pleasures, but you end up feeling closer and more loved and supported in your relationships. So there's also some really interesting research out of the University of Japan where there's part of the merits of feeling more connected in a walk is the synchronicity of your pace. Now, you don't have to get all goofy on this and try to sync up with your partner whom you're walking side by side with. However, a lot of times it just happens naturally. Steve Jobs was a huge fan of having walking meetings. And what they're finding in the research is that in as little as 4 minutes, strangers can more easily bond and have more favorable opinions of each other when just going on a short walk together. Some of the studies even showed that even if they were just silent on the walk, the synchronicity actually still made them feel more favorable towards each other. Then there are the Eureka moments that happen only when your mind is allowed to wander and meander and wind along the road without a clear destination. Having an activity such as walking to focus on that doesn't take a whole lot of cognitive resources because we're so practiced and used to walking, that allows the brain to have this beautiful alchemy of great ideas because it's got something to focus on, but not too tightly. And so the looseness then allows for these eureka moments. And they say eureka moments can happen in the shower as well. It's anytime you're doing an activity that doesn't require a ton of focus. But with walking, I'm about to share with you, has all of these other benefits that increase your creativity, more so than perhaps the shower, eliciting possibly more eureka moments, either then or later in the day. Many writers and philosophers have always subscribed to the creative benefits of walking. There's actually a quote from Henry David Thoreau in his journal that said, "Methinks that the moment my legs begin to move, my thoughts begin to flow." This has been my experience a million times over. So in addition to being a photographer and a coach and a course creator, I am a writer. And whenever I feel really stuck in my writing, as soon as I get walking, my ideas come out. And sometimes they come so fast, it's a bit of a challenge. I then need to quickly open up the notes app on my phone and start frantically typing or voice memoing what my thoughts are. But it's so much better than when they're stuck, not moving at all. One of the reasons that is because when we move our body in any kind of way, movement stimulates these tiny proteins called BDNF that are created in your brain when you move. Dr. John Medina, author of the book Brain Rules, he says BDNF proteins are like Miracle Grow for your brain. So if your brain was feeling stagnant when you were sitting in your chair for 8 hours today, that's your BDNF has actually, it lowers after about 20 minutes of sitting. And just as soon as you start moving, it fires up again. Makes sense. Walking is such a great way to boost your brain power. all winter. I know a lot of days my only walk was from the desk to the refrigerator and experiencing Zoom life. So it makes sense as to why a lot of us, one of the reasons that we might be coming out of a pandemic brain fog. We weren't moving enough to juice up that BDNF. And as I said already, BDNF decreases the longer we sit. In fact, Dr. Medina actually pretty pointedly states that if you were to create a setting in which it's really difficult for your brain to learn anything, and you were creating that setting for children, it would look like a classroom. And if you were to create a setting for adults in which it's very difficult for you to flex your cognitive skills in the workplace, it'd look like a cubicle farm at an office. If not given enough credence to the creative and cognitive benefits of walking for a really long time in our society. We might think we know all this, but do we actually put it into practice? And we should. We have big problems to solve in our society, in our lives, and walking helps. So our ancestors that predate us by a lot walked upwards of 12 miles a day. They were trying to figure out how to solve problems in an unstable environment and navigate unpredictable uncertainty. So those who were sedentary in our ancestral lineage didn't survive. I'm raising my hand. Netflix wouldn't have gone far back in the day. In 1889, about 100 years before I was out photo walking with a roll of film, Nietzsche said, all truly great thoughts are conceived by walking. And we can see why. We've got the BDNF, we've got the Miracle Grow for our brain. We're able to mull over tricky situations on a walk, and we've got more of the brain boost to solve them. And you might be thinking, okay, I'll get a treadmill desk, or I already have a treadmill desk. And for sure, that can increase your BDNF as well. I am definitely a proponent of not staring at the wall in front of me over and over again, especially after the past year that we've had, because our creative brains also love novelty. But I will point out that any kind of walking, a treadmill desk type of walking, does help with convergent thinking of solving problems. And then walking outside in nature, it is definitely very excellent at generating divergent thinking, coming up with ideas. So get outside if you're having writer's block or some sort of block to generate a lot of ideas. And then there are the stress recovery benefits that go along with just being outside in nature. This is an episode for a different day, but suffice it to say, when we are stressed, we are not creative. We do not have access to the creative areas of our prefrontal cortex. So when we're outside, we also get this boost of serotonin, which, here's a cool one, can reduce the feeling of being tired. So who among us after this year isn't kind of tired? I know that many of the members in my paid Life Feast community report feeling really fatigued. A year of homeschooling, Zoom life, all of that will do it for you. Get outside, get that sunlight into your retina, on your skin, and get energized. Being outside is this natural stress reducer. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that calms you down, and it decreases your sympathetic nervous system, the one that revs you up. So it decreases your fight, flight, or freeze reactive ruts, as I like to say. And then there were studies out of Stanford that showed that creativity was boosted after research participants had gone for a walk, and the creativity lasted for a time period afterwards. So truly, give your creativity some legs. That's a great way to get your synapses firing, get your thoughts moving, generating great ideas, problem solving, writing poetry, taking pictures, whatever inspires you. And I will get to the photo walk later on in this episode. First, I want to tell you about my new favorite Italian word that is also a type of walk. I'm so in love with this concept. So the word is Passagietta, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But in this beautiful Italian tradition, Passagietta is this leisurely walk or stroll that's taken in the evenings by Italian families in Italian communities. And it's not just an evening walk to digest food or to earn their dinner. Those are more American belief systems, in my opinion. But a Passagietta usually involves walking to the center of town, to the piazza, and seeing the community. They might go get a gelato, chat with their neighbors. I'm having so much fun with this Italian fantasy over here. This extrovert wanderluster is definitely crazing Passagietta in post-quarantine. A huge pillar of positive psychology, that which I am certified in and what the Life Feast is based in, is that other people matter. And haven't we missed humans a lot? We're definitely starved for some in-person connections, spending way too much time connecting over social media. And that was happening long before 2020 hit. We've probably reached a new level, but a Passagietta, this evening stroll in which walkers are connecting with their families and their communities, and they're not power walking to reach a Fitbit goal. This is all about connection. It is FaceTime, the real kind of FaceTime in person versus Facebook. It's smiling at your neighbors. And I just love that we can luxuriate in that for a hot second in this more divided world that we're living in right now. So bring a little Italian swagger to your summer walks. Walk with your family in the evening. Go get some gelato. Serendipitously bump into people who you haven't seen in over a year, safely, of course. My second type of walk that I want to share with you is a slightly different flavor than the Passagietta, but it is from a neighboring country. This is the French tradition of being a flaneur on a walk. So a flaneur is someone who walks a city in order to soak up all the details of that city, to really take it all in. And it was coined by the poet Baudelaire back in the day. Just Passagietta. It's not really translatable into English because it's traveling at its essence. It's this leisurely wander where one is paying attention to all of the beauty and the details of a city that you might otherwise overlook. I have definitely done this in cities. I never knew the name for it, but my husband and I walked all over San Francisco, which is not an easy place to flaneur. It's a lot of uphill. And we've walked all over New York City. It's always opened us up to out-of-the-way restaurants or cafes or farmers markets, chance meetings, and these ways to experience the essence of the city, as I've already talked about, and not just like the tchotchke shops of the city or the tourist destinations. A connoisseur of the street and walking sans destination. I point out that when we're busy staring down at our phones or talking on our phone incessantly or answering messages while walking, we miss out on this essence even in our own hometown. So this is the poetic antidote to a rushed version of life where we feel like we constantly have to be productive 24 hours a day. It makes sense that Baudelaire was a poet, a writer who just sits at home all day staring at TikToks, whatever you're staring at. But, developing strange thumb carpal tunnel from swiping and strolling, that writer is going to run out of things to write about or sound like everybody else. I found this fun fact. William Wordsworth, the poet, supposedly walked 180,000 miles in his lifetime. This, when they calculated out, it would have been an average of 6.5 miles a day, starting from when he was age 5. Let loose your creative self to soak up the details of a city. Go for a flaneur. Or taking a passagietta aren't in your repertoire. How about a walking meditation? A walking meditation is where you're going to deliberately pay attention to something you rarely pay attention to. And I'm laughing thinking of some people in my family who might be thinking, oh, I already thought these walks sounded hard. Now I've got to walk and meditate. But it's simpler than it sounds if you've never done it. You just slow down and you pay attention to each action that comprises something pretty basic like a walk. You notice how you might place your heel down first, then your toe, then you shift your weight, right foot, left foot. You're noticing your gait, your rhythm, your breath, and how your feet make contact with the ground. You notice what your eyes are taking in. You pay attention to all of these tiny sensory details, and by being this present in something so mundane, you keep your thoughts from running rampant 5 miles ahead of you. If you do lose focus, you just bring your attention back to the basics. So this is a favorite mindfulness-based stress-reducing activity. Jon Kabat-Zinn, the founder of and creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, he cites that a mindful walking meditation can calm stress hormones, increase your focus and your attention, something that's probably pretty needed in our distracted world. Again, it's not always easy. Start with a short portion of your walk. Try to be mindful. I actually remember a number of years ago, I had an experience where I saw a labyrinth for the first time. And labyrinths are this beautiful environment for practicing a walking meditation. I had no idea. I thought it was just a cool maze to explore. I crisscrossed around and I wasn't even remotely following the path. So the second time I came upon a labyrinth, I was with a group of friends on a retreat. My friend Tara explained how to actually mindfully walk a labyrinth, and that it meanders around and you follow it in and out, and each passage might look like it's taking you closer to the center, or you look like you're really close to the center and all of a sudden the path sends you to the outside of the circle. I found this to be very frustrating, actually. I did not fall in love with the labyrinth practice. I thought, oh, this is quite tedious. Why don't I just hop over this path and then I'll get to the center? I had this objective the entire time to get there being in air quotes, and I was missing the point of it. So fortunately, I had a third try, 3 times a charm, with a labyrinth experience. I went back to the same labyrinth and I made a concerted effort to slow down and to have my goal to just pay attention in each moment, rather than to have my goal to race a bunch of 40-something women on retreat back to the center of the labyrinth. And this is a beautiful metaphor for my own life, my own pace. But I ended up being dead last in the labyrinth walk, and I'll tell you, I felt like I had unloaded about 8 suitcases of stress along the journey. I was doing this labyrinth walk after ending a 14-year stint in owning a restaurant, and I can't even begin to say how much my nervous system needed this level of a slowdown. So be patient with yourself. The awareness that it takes to get the effect of the walking meditation does take time, but it's well worth it. And it's very easy to practice in small increments. No labyrinth required. There's a beautiful quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, and the summary of it is pretty simple. He says, "The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on this earth." Here's the full quote. "People usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle, but I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own 2 eyes. All is a miracle." And that is from Thich Nhat Hanh, which is a beautiful segue into the next type of walk, awe walks. Miracles built right in. So awe is defined by psychologists as this sensation of being in the presence of something vast that simultaneously transcends your understanding of the world, and it's a state of being that straddles the boundary between pleasure and a little bit of fear. You can think of awe as this vastness. Maybe you stand in awe of something really spectacular out in the world, top of a mountain type of awe. But awe doesn't have to be related to nature. In this context of an awe walk, I think nature helps, but awe can be experienced like at a theater production or in an opera or in a sporting event. The vastness of being in community with others, watching something spectacular. So Interesting thing about awe is that awe is actually one of the strongest predictors of people being able to break down inflammation in their bodies in positive emotion studies that have been done. So people who have said that they've experienced many moments of awe in their lives had lower inflammation marker cytokines. These are an indication that you don't have a lot of inflammation in your body and that you're bit better able to break inflammation down. I like to say, think about it. If you're staring at a rainbow or at the wonders of the world, you're not stressing about your mortgage or your to-do list or any of the things that you presently are ruminating about. If you're cultivating an awe practice, you're actively offsetting detrimental effects of stress in your body. One of the main authors of the awe research, Dr. Keltner, he had said the fact that awe, wonder, and beauty promote healthier levels of cytokines suggests that the things that we do to experience these emotions, a walk in nature, losing oneself in music, beholding art, has a direct influence upon health and life expectancy. He is the co-author of the awe study along with Jonathan Haidt. Dr. Keltner is a psychologist and researcher at UC Berkeley. So I want to just repeat that last bit. The things we do to experience these emotions of awe, a walk in nature, losing oneself in music, beholding art, has a direct influence upon our health and life expectancy. So let's go chase those rainbows, guys. They could help you live longer. But you don't even actually need rainbows or the Grand Canyon to reap the benefits of an awe walk. Dr. Virginia Sturm actually partnered up with Dr. Keltner to do some studies with awe walks and aging adults. Dr. Sturm, she is a professor of neurology and psychiatry. They had two groups of older adults, and they asked them to take a 15-minute walk once a week for 8 weeks. And then they had a control group, of course, as every research experiment worth its salt. Control group was told to just get outside and take a walk and basically experience all the benefits of walking that we've previously mentioned. And there are many. Other group, the group that they were primarily researching, they were told to find awe on their walks. The instructions for both groups were walk alone at a light pace, minimize the use of your phones, i.e. unplug, and be outside. But they did need to take a selfie before, during, or after the walk. And then the awe group, the instructions that they were given basically were to tap into their childlike sense of wonder, notice the trees and the skyscrapers and the vastness of things. And then they were also supposed to really zoom in on the tiny details, notice the leaves and the flowers and maybe historic monuments, read those plaques that they stumbled upon, consider the stories of whatever was being honored with that monument. And they should actively seek out novelty as well. Basically just do anything that would induce an experience of awe on their walk. Small awe, big awe, didn't matter. After 2 months of doing these awe walks, the awe group had less distress, less anxiety, and less feelings of disconnection. All of these that actually can be common in aging populations. They said, I noticed the different colors amidst the leaves on my walk, and I'm excited to see my granddaughter next week. And then the control group still got health benefits from walking, no doubt about that. But it was clear that without the awe inspiration, a lot of them were doing the problem solving that we had talked about, maybe thinking about to-do lists or going over everything that needed to get done before a vacation. They weren't experiencing the same level of awe that the other group was. And what was fascinating with the research was that the researchers were pretty intrigued by how the selfies turned out. The selfies originally were just intended to orient the researchers to the walkers' locations. Like, were they walking in nature and did that help more? Were they walking in the suburbs or in the city and how did that affect the walk? But what they hadn't expected was that the size of the self in the selfie shrunk considerably throughout the study. In the awe group only, not in the regular walking group. So the awe group noticeably shared photos of themselves where they seemed more connected to the landscape. They were showcasing more of the scenery and less of themselves. And I think given our more self-obsessed culture these days, that's a pretty fascinating fact. Oh, they also measured the smiles. I love this. There was a panel of judges using a 5-point rating system on genuine smiles, and the smiles were bigger for the awe walkers. The selves got smaller and the smiles got bigger. We are mere mortals walking on this earth, aren't we? We're not the center of the show, despite what we tend to think a lot of the time. And it's healthier for our bodies and probably healthier for our world to expand to a more interconnected way. Going for an awe walk is a great way of doing that. We are segueing into novelty. Our brains have a huge desire to see new things, to shake up the same old. And this next walking suggestion might seem absolutely crazy, crazier than a moonwalk or a cakewalk or any kind of walk, but I dare you to give it a try. And it is to walk backwards for some or all of a walk. When I was in college, I had a professor, his wonderful English professor. His name was Dr. Dom Consolo. And he actually was the professor that inspired the character in Dead Poets Society that Robin Williams played. So he had been a professor to Michael Eisner, who was the CEO of Disney at the time. And Eisner has said in interviews that when he was creating the movie Dead Poets Society, Dr. Consolo's enthusiastic, inspiring ways of teaching were his muse for that larger-than-life Dead Poets Society character. So I had Dr. Consolo my senior year of college, and what was completely wild and fantastic about him was that not only was he a teacher who had previously jumped on desks and inspired us to greater heights in our literature appreciation, but he walked backwards to school every day. And this was a university that was at the top of a hill in Ohio. It was actually a pretty significant hill and fairly steep. And he would come to class, his cheeks all flushed. He was so excited and revved up. The class, I think, it felt very early. I think it was at 7:30 or 8 in the morning, which felt excruciatingly early for my 21-year-old self. But he would come in and say he was so invigorated. He had walked backwards to school and it was so joyful and incredible. And he saw birds and all kinds of awesome things on this walk of his, basic things. It was a novel way of engaging with life, frontwards, backwards, sideways, in all directions. And Dr. Consolo took it all in. He was challenging his brain to experience this different perspective on life, which leads me to my final type of walk for this episode, the beloved photo walk. It's probably easier than walking backwards, in my opinion, for any length of time. But it also challenges us to find a new perspective. I love the Dorothea Lange quote. It is what my entire Life Feast course is based on. But the camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. In a photo walk, you've got the creativity boosting built-in benefits of BDNF. You've got a reason to hunt for these little artistic, awe-inspiring details along the route. You have to learn how to be mindful and aware and notice the shadows and the light and these little vignettes that nobody pays attention to. And it's a reason to get outside, right? Despite the elements, which gives you all these juicy, stress-reducing benefits of the great outdoors. And if you're increasing your capacity for joy and creativity, you may as well take photos of the things that make you happy. Inside of my free photo walk guide, there are prompts for a small joys walk. There are prompts for a gratitude and appreciation walk. So many ways to increase the positivity of this walk. You don't need to live in a scenic place to enjoy a photo walk. I actually live in a pretty scenic place, and I also love photo walking in urban environments. My creative side loves seeing the novelty of brightly painted cafe tables or street scenes. This is the Francophile flaneur type of walk, flanerie type of walk, where I love to soak up the creative energy and details of a city. I actually call them gritty city walks, and I mean that as the highest compliment. It's about looking past the obvious, and it's about taking time to not only notice the beauty and the art in the everyday, but to create beauty and art in the everyday. And it gives you this reason to stop and pause and pay attention to what you might not notice. It also teaches you how to pay attention to light. So if you go for an early morning or an evening walk in the golden hour, you're going to see how interesting shadows look, right? Or to see how something that might look basic at noon is just bathed in golden light. And I'll tell you, my own shadow, when it's 15 feet tall because of the angle of the sun in the early morning, never ceases to delight me. I give these tips in the photo walk guide as well, but when you see something that catches your eye, honor what you stopped for to take the picture. But then also try different angles. Get down low, go up high, move to the side, see how the light changes. Be really present with whatever you're taking a photo of. This can be a mindfulness practice as well as a creativity practice. Honor what you stopped for. I always love to say that. If something catches your eye, stop for it. The point of it to have the outcome of this fabulous photo. It can just be about awareness, and as Dorothea Lange said, teaching you how to see without a camera. Try to get rid of all the judgment around it. I promise you will be pleasantly surprised by trying different angles and, as I like to say, trying, worm's eye view, getting down low, or bird's eye view, shooting from above. And then also honor whatever it is that caught your eye without a photo. I call these photos for your soul, but just to take that moment to just take it in and not be rushing to take the photo of it. And you don't need a fancy camera to go on a photo walk. The old adage that is even more true today is that the best camera is the one that you have with you. And an iPhone, an Android, whichever one you have, they're fantastic to use on a photo walk. As I said, you can also just power off and have reverence for what you're seeing and take those photos for your soul. Let's wrap this up. There are all these different types of walks. If you're craving being a little more connected to other people, go for that Passagietta. If you're embarking on a new city or just trying to experience your own city with fresh eyes, flutter about. If you're trying to create, if you're writing, if you're making classes, when I'm thinking about podcast ideas and I feel like I have zero ideas and I'm completely stuck, I might take our dog for a walk or sneak off on my lunch break and just aimlessly wander by the river. The calming aspects help lower my stress level, and then the ideas pretty much start flowing when I'm even just walking down the stairs of my building. And then if my husband and I need to just And then when my husband and I need some time together because we haven't been alone in 18 months, or we need to chat about things going on in our lives, that synchronized pace, that walking together side by side is this way to feel closer, whether we're talking or not, which probably really suits my husband pretty well because he is not as much of a talker as I am. And then when I'm feeling pretty stressed, taking some time out of my walk to just unplug and do a little bit of a meditative walk is one of the easiest ways to just get out of that frazzled brain. None of these walks that I've given you need to take up a lot of time in your life. They do probably need some undistracted time, and we're not that practiced at that these days. But there are so many benefits to walking. So fire up those feet, turn off the tech, at least for a portion of your walk, and get moving. If you need some inspiration for your photo walks and you don't have my free photo walk guide, or you don't have the updated version of the photo walk guide, head down to the show notes here in the podcast episode and download the free guide. As I said, it's a trifecta of wellness with the brain boosting benefits, the creativity boosting benefits of being on the walk, the stress reducing benefits of being out in nature, and then teaching yourself how to see all these little moments of awe and savor the moments of small joy. There's nothing better than it. Happy walking, my friends. I can't wait to hear how it goes. so much for listening to the Life Feast podcast. I'm Lizzie LaRocque, and I'm grateful that you are here with me. Would you do me a huge favor and leave a rating and a review on iTunes if you haven't already? It helps this podcast tremendously, and it only takes a couple of seconds. You could also share this podcast with a friend, a loved one, a coworker, anyone who you want to get into these more creative conversations with, or you think would benefit from this episode. I know I get my best podcast recommendations from my friends. And if you love what you heard today, you've got to come check out the Life Feast. It's my signature online and in the wild program, and it's the spot for connection, creativity, and community. You will love it. If you like this episode, you will definitely love it. All of the details are over at thelifefeast.com. Get ready to feast on your life. I can't wait to see you in there.